So, picture this. You're a newlywed. You've got a dream job, a beautiful home, and a husband who adores you. Life is perfect. And then, you're murdered in your own living room. The house, trashed, glass shattered, a bloody handprint smeared on the wall. The whole thing looks like a botched robbery. But here's the problem. Nothing was stolen. And for over 2 decades, the LAPD would insist it was a random break-in gone wrong. But the truth? It was never random. This is the brutal murder of Sherri Rasmussen, a case the LAPD spent 23 years pretending they hadn't already solved. All right, let's rewind. It's 1985 in Los Angeles, and Sherri Rasmussen is absolutely killing it. Not literally, but in life. She's 29 years old, a brilliant nurse, and already the director of critical care at Glendale Adventist Medical Center. She's got the whole young, successful woman in the 80s thing locked down. And on top of that, she just got married to John Rutten. Now, John is your standard all-American guy, tall, good-looking, engineering degree, solid job at a tech company. He and Sherri met at a party, hit it off instantly, and within a few years, boom, married. They moved into a beautiful condo in Van Nuys and started planning their future. But here's the thing, Sherri wasn't just stressed about work. She was stressed about someone else, a woman from John's past. Someone who, according to Sherri, was acting way too obsessed with him. Someone who had been showing up at their house uninvited. Someone who had, on more than one occasion, told Sherri, to her face, that John was meant to be with her. And that woman was an LAPD officer. Hey, this story is just getting started. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more here on Tailscape. Now, if that doesn't send up red flags, I don't know what does. But here's where things get really messed up. Because on February 24th, 1986, John came home from work and found his wife beaten to death in their living room. Sherri had been brutally attacked, beaten, bitten, and finally shot 3 times in the chest. The crime scene? A complete war zone. Broken furniture, shattered glass, a bloody handprint on the wall. It looked like she had fought for her life. And the cops? They took one look at the scene and went, "Yup, classic burglary." You know, because burglars always break in, ignore thousands of dollars of jewelry and cash, beat a woman to death, and leave without stealing anything. Right? But here's the worst part. LAPD didn't just miss the real killer. They already knew who she was. All right, so at this point, you've got a brutally murdered woman, a crime scene that screams personal rage, and a police department that took one look at the whole thing and said, probably just a burglary. But let's break that down for a second. Sherri Rasmussen wasn't just killed, she was obliterated. The autopsy showed she had been pistol whipped so hard that the gun had literally split her lip open and fractured her teeth. She had defensive wounds all over her body, bruises from head to toe, and here's a fun little detail, a human bite mark on her arm. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never heard of a burglar who breaks into a house, forgets to steal anything, and then bites their victim in the middle of the attack. But LAPD, they didn't just ignore that detail, they actively buried it. Instead of looking into Sherri's personal life, instead of asking John if anyone had been threatening her, they doubled down on the burglary gone wrong theory. They told John to move on, to let them handle it, and to not ask too many questions. But let's talk about what LAPD didn't do. They didn't process the bite mark for DNA. Yes, they had it, and no, what? They didn't use it. They didn't talk to the one person Sherri had explicitly told people she was afraid of. And they didn't bother to check their own records. Because if they had, they would have seen that the woman Sherri was terrified of was one of their own officers. And this wasn't just any officer. Her name? Stephanie Lazarus, a well-respected detective in the LAPD, one of their own. And back in the early 80s, she had been madly in love with John Rutten. Now, let's be clear, John and Stephanie were never an official couple. They had dated casually in college, hooked up a few times, but John never saw her as more than a friend with benefits. Stephanie, on the other hand, she thought John was the love of her life, and when he got engaged to Sherri, she lost her mind. We're talking full-blown obsession. Stephanie showed up to Sherri's office unannounced, cornered her in the parking lot, and straight up told her that John belonged to her. She even went to John and Sherri's home, let herself in, as in walked in like she lived there, and sat on their couch wearing her LAPD uniform. just to let Sherri know exactly who she was dealing with. And Sherri? She was terrified. She told multiple people, including her own family, that Stephanie was unstable and that if anything ever happened to her, they should look at the crazy ex-cop girlfriend. And then, a few months later, Sherri was dead. The case was wide open. All they had to do was investigate the woman Sherri had literally warned them about. But LAPD? They buried it. And for the next 23 years, Stephanie Lazarus walked around completely free, climbing the ranks, solving cases, and literally working in the exact same police department that was supposed to be investigating her. She even got promoted to the art theft division, which, honestly, is pretty fitting, because she had already stolen an entire murder investigation and made it disappear. For 23 years, Stephanie Lazarus walked around like nothing happened. She got promoted, got married, built a career, while Sherri Rasmussen's case sat collecting dust in an LAPD filing cabinet. But here's the thing about evidence. It doesn't go away. And in 2009, a few cold case detectives were going through old files when they found something interesting. Sherri's case. Now, remember, LAPD had originally written this off as a burglary gone wrong. But when the cold case unit took a second look, the burglary theory made no damn sense. The house wasn't ransacked, just staged to look that way. Expensive jewelry? Untouched. A robbery crew doesn't break into a house, kill someone in a full-blown, rage-filled brawl, and then leave thousands of dollars in cash and valuables sitting there. So the cold case team starts digging. And then they find the bite mark. This was 2009. DNA technology had come a long way. Back in the 80s, LAPD had taken a saliva swab from that bite mark, but since they were too busy not solving the case, it had been sitting in storage for decades. So they run it. And guess what? The killer was a woman. This instantly blew up the entire original case. Because remember, LAPD had spent 2 decades insisting this was a burglary gone wrong. But now, the evidence was literally screaming that Sherri had been murdered by another woman. And suddenly, that one name, the one Sherri had told everyone she was afraid of, was back on the table. Stephanie Lazarus. Now, at this point, the cold case detectives knew they were about to drop a nuclear bomb inside the LAPD. Because Stephanie wasn't some retired cop living in another state. She was still working in the department. They couldn't just bring her in for questioning without tipping her off. So they came up with a plan. They called her down to the LAPD art theft division where she worked and casually asked for her help on an unrelated case. No handcuffs, no suspicion. Just, "Hey, Stephanie, can we talk to you for a sec?" And when she walked into that room, they shut the door behind her. Now, the interrogation, it was a masterclass in catching a killer off guard. The detectives didn't start with accusations. They acted like they were just tying up loose ends on an old case. And Stephanie? She played along. At first, she was calm, smiling, laughing, cracking jokes, but then they asked about John Rutan. Suddenly, the smile started fading. She admitted they had dated, admitted she was sad when he got engaged to Sherri, admitted she had seen Sherri once or twice, and then they dropped the hammer. "Did you know Sherri was murdered?" Boom. Instantly, Stephanie started stumbling over her words. She kept saying, well, I might have seen her once. I don't really remember." Then, they told her they had DNA evidence. That was game over. Stephanie completely lost it, started panicking, talking in circles, saying things like, "Am I a suspect? This is crazy. You guys must be misreading something." And just like that, LAPD arrested one of their own detectives for a murder she had committed 23 years earlier. In 2012, Stephanie Lazarus was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 27 years to life in prison. And the LAPD? Well, they spent a lot of time pretending that this wasn't one of the biggest cover-ups in department history. Sherri Rasmussen spent decades without justice, not because her case was hard to solve, but because the person who killed her had a badge. Thanks for watching, and if you're as fascinated by tales like these as we are, make sure to stick around for more.